Hello everybody and welcome to another video for ELT, writing ELT materials. So today I'm absolutely delighted to have Laura and Billy with me from Otter ELT. I'm sure you've all heard of Otter ELT, but I'll let you two do your own introduction if you like.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having us on and for chatting to us. Yeah, as you said, we're Otter ELT. So we are a digital focused agency, or some people might use the term packager. So we basically work with publishers, institutions, edtech companies, and we provide different digital services. So it could be writing, editing, project managing, research, development, consulting, things like that. So we hire the freelancers. So we have a database of freelancers and we sort of manage the project. They're usually sort of larger scale projects, just because sort of in-house teams are smaller than they used to be. So they would hire someone like us to perhaps manage that for them if they don't have the in-house capacity to do it. Laura, maybe you can talk about sort of some of the projects that we work on.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just to reiterate, thanks for having us. And yes, we've been doing, funnily enough, we've been doing lots of assessment projects over the past year or so. And some of them are really interesting because they include the discovery phases, going through to meeting up with, potential users in the market, talk to them about their, experiences already, what they really need. And then solving, how to produce that for them in obviously a digital component. So, and then bringing in the digital knowledge of how to effectively communicate exactly what students need to do in an assessment, which is, I think, is probably one of the hardest things to do because it's when students are at their most stressed and maybe less receptive than maybe when they're studying at home, and feeling a bit more relaxed. So we find them really, really interesting to work on those types of projects because there's lots of kind of things to bring into them and ensure, kind of clarity and friendly tones. So lots of assessments been coming up, which works extremely well as well because Billy particularly has a lot of assessment experience personally as a professional freelancer previously. And then I've been bringing in more of the SEN and kind of creative side to other projects, whether that may be creating games with graded readers and we've been doing lots of consultancy work for different platforms as well, whether that's accessibility or, kind of content directed as well. So quite an array of things we've been doing.
It sounds exciting. Sorry, Billy. It sounds very like it's made for you two as well, because this morning actually I read the summary of the talk that you gave at IATEFL for Morsig, and it's on the Morsig blog, so I'll share a link to that below. But when I read your blurbs, I thought, oh, that's such a great combination there, because as you say, Laura, you've got the SEN background and you bring in different things to play. And I think I always get this expression wrong, but I think, the sum of your part is greater than whatever it is.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I think when Laura and I met, we knew that our skills worked together. We just didn't know in what capacity. And then I think we were both working on digital materials in both of our respective areas. And then this is sort of how the idea for Otter came up a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think you're right.
Great.
I can't remember the expression either.
Yeah, but we know what we mean, and I'm sure people watching will know what we mean. Yeah. Okay, so the big question for our audience, if you like, who are would-be ELT writers and ELT writers and teachers who write materials, for somebody who's used to writing print materials, what's different about writing digital materials?
I think maybe to start by just sort of breaking down what digital materials are in general, because it's quite an all-encompassing term. So it could be sort of like self-study apps, it could be videos, for example. It could be things that accompany print material as well. So perhaps, you know, publishers have their online platforms, so it could be some of the downloadable material on there. There's sort of a whole array of different digital materials, but we don't, when we're referring to digital materials, it's not really sort of like a downloadable PDF, for example. Often they're interactive. There's a reason why they're online rather than just being online for the sake of being online. That's what we found so far anyway, because I think if not, it's just sort of creating a usual print material and then just uploading it onto the internet, basically. Laura, is there anything I've forgotten in the digital material realm?
No, I think that's it. And yeah, of course, you know, there will be those courses that you know, you can either take yourself online, you know, the autonomous ones, or whether you're doing it as part of a hybrid class. So they, you know, some of them are built to be on a desktop rather than on a tablet or a phone. And I think within those, they bring their own differences. There are so many, I'm trying to think of the main ones right now, so we can kind of touch on the most. Obviously, the most obvious, if you're working on an app, let's say, is the screen size. You know, and so you're writing, the skill of digital writing, I think, is to be so clear and so concise, knowing that nothing else is backing up those words that you're writing. And I think that's kind of pins it down to, you know, the main thing. There's no teacher, there is no workbook, there is no other sentence to explain it, there's no grammar reference. It is just that rubric, that activity, and then you go on to the next one. And you know, you'll probably have feedback that automatically comes up as well. And so those bring huge differences in the writing. And I think, yeah, as I say, you know, being short, being and friendly as well, you know, a light, friendly tone, to kind of give the sentences kind of a personable feeling, because otherwise the student's just reading a screen and they can interpret it in many different ways.
That's really interesting to me that you've just mentioned the tone, because I would not have even considered that before. But I suppose if you've got a book and you're in a class, the teacher is the, you know, the friendly tone there. But that's something I would never even have considered. So that's a great little gem.
Yeah, I think also just the interpretation sort of related to the tone as well, you know. Something that we've been working on recently, an assessment that has images, but for example, their image to the person who selected the image might look like an apple or an elephant, but to somebody who's never seen that, has no context, you know, the image might not be clear. So there's a lot of contextualization that has to be given, like Laura said, in the rubrics, or perhaps there's like often a narrative thread as well that might sort of activate prior knowledge and say, okay, you studied this in the previous lesson, this is the reason why we're doing this now. But again, it is always very succinct, because there are character limits as well as sort of screen size limitations, and that also has to be considered, because it might be a web platform that can also be accessed on an iPad or a phone. So you have to consider those 3 different screen sizes. I'm sure we're all looking at completely different size screens now, and it all looks completely different. So yeah, I think that's definitely a major one for sure.
Yeah, that thing what you just said about the image, that's really interesting. I read an article years and years ago about how we make so many assumptions, don't we, as people, not just as teachers or writers. We make so many assumptions. And the article, it was nothing to do with ELT, but it was about how we assume that when we see an image, we understand the same as, you know, everybody else from that image, and it could mean something completely different to somebody from a different background, different culture, etc. So that's something that's really, really interesting. And yeah, of course, that would be really, really important.
I
Yeah,
think
that's fabulous.
different digital environments as well, you know, again, with the assumptions, we assume everyone has the same internet bandwidth or everyone has the same capabilities, and that's just not the case. There's definitely low tech environments where they still require digital materials, but just in a different format, or perhaps EAL assessments that has to be thought of from a different perspective because of the background. Perhaps the students have been through trauma. There's just a lot of different components to think about, because you don't have that, okay, as a writer, you don't always have that interaction with the end user of the product, but you sort of have more of an idea if you're coming from a teaching perspective, who's going to use those materials, whereas digital sort of goes a bit further in that aspect because it can. Yeah.
So if you were contracting some writers to work on one of your products for a publisher, because I'm thinking that, you know, the number of people who've already developed these skills and the percentage of writers who've already developed these very particular skills, if you like, are, you know, it isn't a great number. So am I right in thinking that you will provide that information then, help and support, if you like, you know, for the particular project, that you'll give them some kind of guidelines if they work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly as you say, every single project has very, very different requirements, whether it's working into templates, whether it's using a CMS platform, whether it's going straight into Word and, you know, then that's dealt with later. But one of the key things is to show the writer what it's going to look like in the end. So, you know, for example, here are examples of the app that this is going into, or here are examples of the, you know, the self-study you know, desktop course that it's going into, so they can picture it first. I think that's one of the key things.
That's brilliant. That's so helpful. That's a little bit like when you teach projects to children, isn't it? And you say you're going to make this, or the, you know,
You
you're
give
going to,
them
and
a model, don't you?
yeah,
Yeah.
What you gave an abbreviation then? Was it LCMS?
CMS.
That's it. Yeah. So what can you tell us what that is, please?
So there, remind me of the exact words, Billy, for CMS.
Content management software platform. So it's basically, say someone goes on to create a course. I'll give some examples. It might be Teachable, or Thinkific is another one. Say a teacher created their own course. It would be the management platform where all of that information is. So perhaps videos can be played, perhaps there's interactive activities on there. So it's sort of like the nucleus of the whole digital project, basically.
And when you have to write into them, they're all similar, effectively. If you're writing directly into one, you'll be given a code for whatever that specific item or activity you're writing is, you know, what module or class or course it refers to. You go into that, and then there'll just be, it's a bit like filling in a form, and you fill in loads of different fields with your activities. Sometimes there'll be preset, so you're kind of choosing and then you're writing in your content. Some of them are really good because if the content doesn't perfectly align with the style guide or the style formatting, it won't let you carry on. So that's a really useful way of it already editing what you're doing. Character length, maybe these grammatical symbols aren't allowed, maybe you can't have hyphens, whatever. So they're actually quite good once you kind of get used to them. We are seeing more now requirements to use coding, but that's particularly at the moment, it's something that publishers are doing. So, you know, we provide the content and they will put it into the code. But I think that'll be a thing soon, where just learning how to code things.
So maybe that's a skill that would be writers or people who want to get into more of this kind of work. Maybe that's a skill that it would be good to develop. I was going to ask you actually, what kind of you know, how can people develop the skills they need to write for digital?
As with anything, let's say you want to be an architect, you'd go and see lots of different buildings. You know, if you want to be an artist, I'm plucking things out of the air here. You know, you will see lots of paintings first, and then it's starting to question, how would I do that myself? How am I interacting with whatever it is? So obviously in this case, this course, on my own, sitting in a noisy cafe with my headphones on, internet's a bit dodgy. How am I interacting with it? Do I understand where the contents page is? Do I understand where I need to go next? Am I receiving feedback? Do I understand why something's incorrect? And all of these questions that pop into your mind, write them down. Write these down, and then when you come to, you know, practice writing, it's okay, so I'm going to answer that question by doing this, and justifying things you're doing, and then it's part of the learning process. I think that's what I would do. I think, what do you think?
Yeah, I think especially coming from a teaching perspective, because both of us did, you know, both of us were teachers, and then we went into materials writing ourselves. And you've got a bit of an imposter syndrome, you know. It's a bit different from editing, because editing, you can take courses with professional bodies and you can work in-house, whereas writing, it's not in-house really. I think it used to be, but not anymore. And so you're sort of coming at it from a point of view like, why would anyone hire me for this work? So as Laura said, definitely use your teacher knowledge in the fact that you have access to course books now. You probably have access to the digital components. Go on there, have a look at them on different devices, use it as if you were the user or the student. And then also try it for different languages, things like Duolingo, Babbel, Mondly, different language learning apps, because that's another aspect. Perhaps if you have access to any online courses as well, perhaps on Udemy or something like that, or even one of your courses, you know, just to experience it. And then you can understand, as Laura said, you need to see the model in order to know what you're going to write. So just experiencing it for yourself is really helpful.
That's really brilliant what you've both said there. I love what Laura said there about, you know, making a note of things and writing it down. And I mean, I think that I think a lot of us probably do that sort of up to a point anyway, don't we? We kind of put ourselves in the shoes of, you know, if we're teaching, we put ourselves in the shoes of the students. Or I can imagine sort of like, just thinking of myself, and just I can imagine using a language learning app, and I'm getting frustrated about certain things. So that would probably be useful, because then I'd be able to think, okay, this is frustrating me. Why is it frustrating? You know, why do I feel frustrated? So how could we eliminate that?
I think also being open to an ever-evolving brief is quite useful. Digital moves so fast, as we know. Like when Laura and I submitted a proposal for IATEFL last year, ChatGPT didn't even exist, right? Now everyone's talking about it, but for how long? Because there will be something else probably by the time the next IATEFL comes around. That's why it's difficult to do a proposal as a digital company. So yeah, I think just be willing and open-minded to changing situations. You know, a company might have an app that has an offline teacher marking, and then all of a sudden the technology's evolved, and by the end of the project they want you to now incorporate some sort of feedback, automated feedback, or because of AI developments. So there might be additions, there might be sort of things that change, and I think that's very much where it differs from print quite heavily.
You're totally right. I think because print has been around for as long as we all know, the structure and the processes are very much, they've been worked out. And I mean, I don't know about the actual printing process, but I think the process of creating all the components, having them together, editing, etc., is, you know, kind of sorted. Everyone understands it. Everyone knows what they're doing. You get the brief as a writer or an editor, go. With the digital thing, it'll be, oh, you know, this at the moment our app does this, or, you know, platform, and then halfway through the project, oh, actually we're trying something new. So please can you put the work into something else? Or we've built this system and we're still not sure. It is new for us. The in-house team is saying that. So everyone is a bit unsure because things are new. They're so new. People aren't. And so it's that, exactly as Billy says, you've just got to go with it because you can't fight it. And I think that's that's a massive mindset thing that I think a lot of print authors will find difficult.
That's brilliant. What a brilliant point. I was just, as you were saying it, actually, my number one response, well, apart from, oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. I can imagine how you'd start work in January and then in June they'd say, okay, we need to move all that over there, or we need to, and my instinctive kind of from where I'm sitting brain is thinking, oh well, we'd have to renegotiate the pay and conditions then, because if I've already done all that and now you're asking me to do this, it's a change in the contract. And so there's a whole load of issues around that whole thing. But ultimately, what you've just described there, to me, it sounds exciting. And that that added thing of it might change, even though I can imagine some writers thinking, oh, that's terribly frustrating. Like, there's another side to it, isn't it? You're on the you're at that sort of,
you're at the forefront,
the word
of what the companies are doing. And I think particularly with tech companies, so if you're writing for a tech company rather than particularly quite a well-established publisher, they're incredibly agile, and it's very exciting. So I think it's trying to go into it with a mindset of there will be moments that it's frustrating, because which project doesn't have that, but also I'm exactly as you said, I'm at the forefront, I'm gaining these new skills, I'm the one who'll be chosen for the next project because I was here doing this now. Whereas if you resist it and it becomes really big, then you'll stop yourself from learning and enjoying the swift motion. So I think it's definitely a mindset that is unusual, because obviously things have only started moving this quickly.
But I think digital writers, if you're coming into that with that mindset, obviously we tell you at the beginning of a project that might be the case because the company's new or because the technology's evolving or something. So that's factored into the contracts, that's factored into the fees. And if it's not, and if it extends beyond that, of course, that's what we're there for, to sort of negotiate and offer more money and better contract terms for that.
Yeah. So. And I think one of the main things as a writer going into these projects is keeping communication really, really up to date. So, because it's quickly moving, these can change from day to day or week to week. It's changing. I don't know, be honest, I do know how to do this, I don't know how to do this, I'm happy with this is great, can we negotiate this? And when we maybe, or email, acknowledge receipt of it, because we're having to check that all the writers are okay with these new changes. And so just to allow, because it's agile and because it's moving quickly, checking that everyone's coming along together requires really, really good communication. I think that's probably one of the main ways to make it an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, because it's all about having the information, isn't it? The information that you need, and having it as quickly as possible, and having, I suppose, being comfortable enough to then ask questions if you've got any doubts, and not feel, oh gosh, if I ask this, they're going to think I'm really silly or daft or whatever. And we tell our students, there's no such thing as a silly question, but then very often I've witnessed a lot of people who are afraid to ask questions just because they'd be thinking, oh, everyone's going to be, and we can't do that. We have to be, we won't learn otherwise. So
exactly, yeah. And that's where that imposter syndrome comes in again. You think, I think because ELT in general, like, it's a very open and welcoming and sharing community in so many aspects, but in other aspects you sort of it's not because you feel like you should know what you're doing, but that's not always true. You always need someone like a Laura or like a John, for example. You need that person to ask advice from, to bounce ideas off. Is this fee what I should be accepting? You know, how should I negotiate? How can I say that I'm unhappy with a situation? I think there always needs to be that person or group or people that you can bounce things off. And I'd say that's also really crucial as a writer, because it is quite a solitary thing. Obviously, if you're still teaching alongside your writing, it's very different as well, because you've got your teaching community, you've got your students, it's very people facing, whereas writing isn't, unless you have sort of meetings and things, but still it's not face to face, it's not the same thing. So like Laura said about the communication, but also just having that person there to bounce ideas off and to sort of confirm things for you in a way, is really important.
You're right, to allow yourself to say it out loud, because sometimes saying it out loud makes you realize something.
Yeah, that's a really good message, actually, because I think that we only know what we know, don't we? And everybody knows something that I don't know, and that I know things that you don't know, and he knows things that and it's very easy, I think, especially with things like techie that we're talking about now. I think it's very easy to suddenly feel, oh my God, everybody just knows so much, and I am just a little, you know. And when you actually start talking, you think, well, hang on a minute, I do actually, you know, I use my apps on my mobile phone, I do these things, you know, so we do know very often more than we give ourselves credit for. I think we're our own worst enemies sometimes, aren't we?
Yeah, I think particularly as a freelancer, it's the way. And I think it's just what I often think, you know, if you're just talking to your friends or whatever, and you know, you're brave enough to say, oh, I didn't know that, whenever someone comments, and they go, how did you not know that? And you know, my response is, because no one's taught me it, so how would I know it? You know, I wasn't born with all this knowledge. So and as you say, it's the sharing. You know, we're talking today, we'll learn things from each other, and you know, you walk out and you see something, you learn something else, and you know, you're always, you know, topping it up. And unless you're, you don't.
And that's another good message, isn't it? Because we are continually learning, we are continually developing, and what we're learning this week might not come in, you know, might be useful in a year's time, or it might have all changed by then anyway. So we have to keep learning. Fantastic. So before we finish, and I ask you to tell us how we can find you, how people can find Otter ELT. Is there anything that occurs to you that you'd like to add, or?
Yeah, I think the main message is, don't be scared of digital materials. Especially sort of like when we moved into the realm of talking about different acronyms and coding and stuff earlier, it's not as scary as it sounds, you know. Like Laura said, often it's writing into a Word document or an Excel sheet, and then the actual ingestion into the platform is done by us or by the client, for example. Sometimes it's writing into digital platforms, but then the training is provided by us. You know, we have meetings, we have check-ins, we have video training, we have personal face-to-face training, written training. So it's not like, okay, you're expected to write in Python, go for it now. You know, it's not like that. And
I think, in fact, at any beginning in the project, we'll assume you haven't done it. Is really, and that's how we'll approach it.
That's really I mean, that's a great way of approaching it, isn't it? It's great because that instantly gives the writer a kind of like sense of relief, because then the writer can say, well, actually, I do know a little bit about this, or you know, and anything is a bonus then.
Exactly.
Brilliant. So where can people find Otter ELT?
Yeah, so we have a website, OtterELT.com, and otter is spelt like the animal. And we also have a LinkedIn page and an Instagram page, so you can message us on there or get in touch with us individually as well, Laura Broadbent or Billy Jago. But yeah, we're usually found together. So if one
and
message
you have a database of potential collaborators, yes? So I suppose people can get in touch and say, you know, give you their information and see if they're a good fit.
Absolutely, yeah. We're our database is quite full at the moment, so we're still keeping up and catching up with all the applications that we've had over the summer, which is great. Probably a lot of people off of your courses as well. So thank you for that. So yeah, we're not hiring at this particular moment because we're quite full, but we will definitely be opening it up again for sort of the winter season, which is always quite busy for us. So yeah. Definitely in touch and drop us a line at any time as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for chatting. I've learned loads, so I'm sure that people who watch this video will learn loads too. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for chatting, and yeah, for sending the writers and things our way as well. We know we've definitely worked with a couple recently on a recent project, and coincidentally I think all three of them took your course, so
oh, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so thanks for listening, everybody. That was Billy and Laura, and we put the details of their website in the comments below, and do get in touch with them if you think that they've got something going on there that you might like to be involved with.